All right, so I'm gonna very quickly explain to you and show you how it is that I actually set up for the deadlift and how I actually go about creating what's called a wedge. A lot of the times people think that wedge is just a position that you get into before you pull the deadlift, but in actual fact, a wedge is a position that you get into, but also the tension that you create whilst in that position before you actually start pulling. So there's going to be two components to the wedge. One is adopting a position where you can get into that position of wedging, which basically just means getting your hips closer towards the bar and letting the knees go a little bit further forward. And then the second component is going to be creating the quad tension that we're all desperately so looking for. So all I do is I get into my deadlift position in terms of my stance. Once I've done that, I just let my knees break ever so slightly. And then what I do is I actually let my hips go back as far back as possible, almost like I'm doing an RDL, whilst I'm actually actively reaching down towards my heels. Once I get down to this position, I can feel a massive stretch in my hamstrings. Once I'm here, I'm gonna hold this position and then just put my hands on the bar in the exact same position that I'm gonna use whilst I'm deadlifting. Once I'm in this position, I'm actually pulling the bar up with my upper body, and I can really kind of feel my shoulder blades pulling apart and my arms getting really, really long here. All I'm gonna do in this position whilst maintaining that tension in the upper body is actually just sort of like drive my knees further forward until my shins touch the bar. Now I'm in this position where I'm wedged. Now the next thing to do from here is actually, if you look at my arms, when I'm in this position and I'm just relaxed and not wedged, then what the deadlift looks like is a very sort of janking motion like that. But in actual fact, what it wants to look like is if I pull myself into that position and then apply pressure through my quads, I should almost start to feel that the bar is actually hovering off the ground. If you can actually start to feel that sensation where you feel like the bar is almost hovering off the ground, you've created enough quad tension. So what we're gonna do, come up to the bar, set the feet in the position that we deadlift. Slight bend in the knees. Set the hips back whilst actively reaching for the heels. Feel the tension. Hands on bar. Pull the bar so you feel like your arms are getting very, very long. And then from there, drive the knees further forward and push into the ground with the knees. And then from there, we go. The hardest thing to do when you're training at a commercial gym or when you're using a barbell that's not a deadlift bar, you don't have the whip that the deadlift bar actually provides. And so when you're using a stiff bar, or most bars in a commercial gym, like one I'm using right here, it's very, very hard to feel that. It almost feels like you're unable to produce any of the quad tension without actually pulling and starting the deadlift. And that's where it becomes hard when you're training at a commercial gym. So I always recommend that people at least try their best to feel this sensation, even if they're not using a deadlift bar. And so to recap, we can see that a wedge is two things. It's the position and then it's the quad tension before you actually pull. If you have any questions, please ask me below. Otherwise, you can follow me on Instagram at Dennis_Silvaki, where I actually talk a lot about these nuances as it relates to SBD.